Nope. Still haven't seen Aladdin. But I watched Spider-Man last night, so let's talk about that. Hey everybody, and thanks for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. So leading up to Spider-Man Far From Home, each week I'm going to look back at one of the live-action Spider-Man films that we've had from Sony, starting this week with Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and Willem Dafoe. If you'd like to talk about this movie with me, I welcome you to do so, and I'd love for you to do so. Just comment all your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below, and let's get a fun conversation started. And with all that out of the way, let's kick this week off by talking about Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man. So Spider-Man came out in 2002 and was the first really big live-action Spider-Man movie. And Spider-Man was a big thing when it first came out in theaters. There wasn't really that much in the superhero genre at the point when Spider-Man came out. There was Superman from the earlier days in the 70s and 80s. There was Batman from 1989 to Batman and Robin in 1997. But by that point, the Batman franchise has really plummeted into the ground with the direction that the studio and Joel Schumacher wanted to take the movies in. You also had Blade, which wasn't that much of a big hit. And then you had X-Men in 1999, which did kind of start the superhero genre and superhero movies that we get now today. But the biggest hit was definitely Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. It was the first movie to hit $100 million opening weekend in the box office. And it took actors like Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and made them household names overnight. And watching Sam Raimi's Spider-Man back again, after seeing all the superhero movies that we have, our market is nowhere short of superhero movies. They're everywhere. There's every single kind of superhero movie out there right now. And going back to Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, this movie is really distinct in its style and has a real personality to it that Sam Raimi brought. Sam Raimi is an alleged Spider-Man fanatic. People have talked about Sam Raimi and how much comics of Spider-Man he's had in his house and how much he just loves the character. And the way that he makes this movie really captures the essence and tone and feel of those really old 60s comics. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know everything about Spider-Man, that I've read every single comic, but I have read some of the 60s comics, and Spider-Man is my favorite superhero of all time. So in some ways, this first Spider-Man movie from Sam Raimi could seem a little dated at times. It can seem a little corny and campy, but that corny and campiness perfectly displays what those 60 comics were. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker in this is the stereotypical bookworm. He even has the whole nerdy kind of look with the glasses and the hair. I guess he's not far off from me. But he does kind of have that stereotypical kind of nerdy look, and he is picked on in a bully way that is kind of outdated, kind of over the top. I mean, like, everybody in the school hates him. There's not one person besides James Franco that really stands by this guy. No one wants to sit with him. He sits alone in the cafeteria. He's mocked. He's picked on by everybody. It's a little over the top and dated nowadays and seems a little cartoony, to be honest. But that's how it was in those 60s comics, and Sam Raimi really brought that to the screen and made it work, in my opinion. And what he does with the campiness and goofiness and cheesiness, really, of those original 60s Spider-Man comics is he takes those campy moments and tones and he makes them fit into this kind of grounded world that he created with characters that feel fleshed out, feel real. And it just makes this movie a lot of fun while also not making itself laughed at. We're laughing with it as opposed to laughing at it. And I thought Sam Raimi really brought a great balance of that to this movie. And another thing I really love about this movie is the pacing. The way that this movie is constructed, I love it. The first hour is like the origin story. In the first 7 minutes of the film, we get introduced to all the characters and all of their relationships are established right away. And Peter Parker's Spider-Bite is edited side by side by Norman Osborn's transformation into the Green Goblin in like the first 20 minutes of the film. The pacing is so great. The story and the movie just goes at such a brisk speed. There's never a dull moment in this movie. The first hour is really that origin story where you meet all the characters. You get introduced to Peter's Aunt May and Uncle Ben, played by Rosemary Harris and Cliff Robertson, and they are so good as those characters. They really brought a real life to Uncle Ben and Aunt May. The minute they come on screen together, I just feel like I know these people, I know their relationship, I know how their life has gone. And that credit's really due to the actors who really just brought these characters to life and made them feel really fleshed out, and their chemistry together was really great. And yeah, they're an aunt and an uncle, and they look more like grandma and grandpa in my opinion. Actually, when I was younger, I thought that they were a grandma and grandpa. I didn't even think they were aunt and uncle. But that's also how it was in the comics. Aunt May was older in the comics. She did kind of resemble more of a grandma than an aunt in my opinion. So Sam Raimi also incorporated that into this movie. And you know what? It works, because Rosemary Harris is great as Aunt May. She's not in this movie that much. She gets definitely more time to shine in the sequels, but she just brings such a warmth and caring, loving nature to her and the character. You really understand how much she cares about Peter and the love and support that Peter has from her. And the relationship established between Peter, Aunt May, and Uncle Ben is also really strong too, because you understand that Peter, he's in his moody teenage years. Uncle Ben's trying to reconnect with him, and Peter just won't let him. And the scene where Uncle Ben is talking to Peter about great power comes great responsibility, and Peter's just not having any of it. And the last thing he says to Uncle Ben about stop pretending to be my father, you really see how much that hurts Uncle Ben. And I like that it's the last thing that Peter says to him, and they don't really get a reconciliation because the next time Peter sees him, he dies in his arms without really having the chance to apologize to him. It really adds to the oomph and the impact that the death of Uncle Ben has on Peter Parker. And Uncle Ben's death was handled perfectly in this movie. Now let's talk about Tobey Maguire in this movie as Peter Parker. Peter Parker by Tobey Maguire in this movie has kind of become a joke to the modern audience and in pop culture. He's known as being the whiny Spider-Man. He cries a lot. He's not really that cool, which it works in this movie, to be honest. I like Peter Parker in this movie. He's definitely the most sensitive of the Peter Parkers that we've gotten. He wears his heart on his sleeve. But that really brings a humanity to Peter Parker in this movie. At school, he really is just the shy kid. He has no confidence at all. With the girl, he's awkward. And as an awkward guy myself, I get it. I relate to Peter so much with his relationship to Mary Jane in this movie. But he has no confidence in himself. He's very shy. And what I like about Peter Parker in this movie is that he's not one note. He's not always just shy. He's not always a recluse. He gets angry. He gets jealous. He even gets selfish. When he first gets his spider powers, he doesn't even think about becoming a hero. He doesn't think of, I'm going to save humanity and fight crime now. No, he's all about, hey, I can use my powers to get a car and impress Mary Jane. And that's his motivation. He doesn't really care about being a hero at first. In the second half of the film, when the origin story is over and he does decide to become Spider-Man, the crime fighter, you really see the confidence and fun that Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker has as this character when he's Spider-Man. When he's Spider-Man in the second half of the film, you see the confidence that is within him. You see the fun he's having as a character. And Tobey Maguire does have some quips as Spider-Man that are very funny. I think he played the character very well, and I thought his character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man worked really well for the movie that Sam Raimi was going for, and the Spider-Man that Sam Raimi was going for. And then we have our villain of Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin. Now, I have heard everybody talk about how ridiculous the costume is, how over the top it is, how Power Ranger-y it looks, but I can tell you right now that young Zach, little Zach, when he first watched this movie, watched it like this.
Piss me off. I'm gonna finish it.
Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin freaked me out as a kid. His voice, his movements, the costume itself with the yellow eyes and you can't see his face scared me. I'm not gonna make jokes about the Green Goblin. I thought Willem Dafoe was really creepy as the character. He scared me. I think he worked really well as the Green Goblin in this movie. And you can tell Willem Dafoe is having a blast in this role of the Green Goblin. I thought Willem Dafoe really got the duality of the character really well in this movie as well. When he's Norman Osborn and he's kind of fighting his insanity that's within and he's kind of fighting the other side of him, you really see the internal struggle. There's a great scene where Willem Dafoe is in front of the mirror and he has to kind of like have a dual personality conversation with himself. He's constantly switching in and out of Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin, and you see it reflected in the mirror. I thought it was great. I thought Willem Dafoe did great as this character in this movie. Yeah, he gets a little campy and cheesy and corny at the time, but like I said, that is what this movie was going for, and it works really well for the world that Sam Raimi had set up. And the relationship between Peter, Norman, and Harry in this movie I really like as well, because you really get the subtle hint that Harry really kind of resents Peter in a way because Norman Osborn is so impressed by Peter. He always kind of brushes off James Franco's Harry. And James Franco, he really plays that role subtly. I like how Sam Raimi kind of set up the shots that a lot of times James Franco, he doesn't say anything. He never indicates to Peter or Norman that he's upset or that he resents their relationship. It's always just like subtle things in the background. When they're at the graduation ceremony and Norman kind of gives a backhanded comment to Harry for graduating, and then he goes straight to Peter Parker and talks about how proud he is about achieving all the rewards. When he's talking to Peter, just in the background you can see James Franco's Harry just kind of leave, like just kind of slip away. And I like that it's very subtle in the background like that. It adds a lot more to the characters and their relationships, and I just like that aspect of that relationship that Sam Raimi did. Another thing that I love about this movie is the incorporation of practical effects and CGI. CGI wasn't the best in 2002, and there's definitely some segments in this movie where it does not look very good. The revenge sequence where Peter Parker's going after the robber that killed Uncle Ben is a great sequence, but CGI Peter Parker does not hold up anymore. When that scene came on, I felt like I was watching a video game cutscene. It just did not look good. It didn't hold up, which was unfortunate. The scene itself and the concept is still very good. The CGI in the scene, though, it's dated. It does not work. It doesn't hold up at all. But aside from that, there is a lot of practical stuff that they did with this movie that I really like. When Peter Parker is discovering his powers and he goes to the side of the building and he starts to climb it, they put that set on the side and they shot it sideways. It looks great. It looks like he's climbing up the wall. It looks like he's physically climbing up the wall. It looks great. I love that climbing sequence. Even though Peter Parker isn't exactly shocked by what he can do, he's just kind of like, whoa, I can climb on walls? Woohoo! Like, he gets, like, really just excited right away. He doesn't really question it, which we're always talking about how he's kind of like a scientist and how he's into science and stuff. You never really get to see him explore this. Like, he never tries to, like, figure out why this happened to him. He just kind of accepts it right away, which could be seen as kind of a negative. When Peter Parker gets his powers, he's just like, whoa, I'm ripped now. Cool. Well, no explanation for that, but I'll take it. And he's, like, spinning webs out of his arms, and he's not at all like, oh my goodness, there's a web inside my arm. He's just kind of like, woohoo! Yeah! I can spin webs. Like, he's playing around in his room, catching pop cans, and again, it's very cheesy and corny and campy, but it works. It's what the comics were like in those 60s, and Sam Raimi really brought it to life in this movie. But there is a lot of physical stunt work done in this movie. There's a lot of practical uses in the movie as well. And I really just love going back to a time where superhero movies had to think creatively about the practicals, and they couldn't just use CGI for everything. And that really does give a credit to the stunt work and the rigging work, and all, because everyone's on a wire in this movie. Everybody's on a wire in this movie. If you watch behind the scenes, you can just like see how many times people are on wires, flying around, and it's just great. It works well in the movie. It looks great still, in my opinion, to this day. And the fight scenes are also very street level. He's a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and in this movie, he does not go over the top. There's no train sequence like in Spider-Man 2. He's taking down robbers, purse snatchers. Like, he's at the lowest scale because he's just beginning as Spider-Man. And I really, really love those segments when he's Spider-Man fighting crime at street level. Getting pictures for J. Jonah Jameson, which is perfectly casted by J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons owns this role so much. The reason I believe we don't have another J. Jonah Jameson in the other movies is because they're afraid to cast someone better than J.K. Simmons. They can't do it. J.K. Simmons nailed this role. He owns it. He nailed the fast-talking personality of J. Jonah Jameson and the look of J. Jonah Jameson as well. He looks ripped right out of the comics. It's great. I love it. J.K. Simmons in this movie is the funniest part of this movie. He's great. I love him in this movie. And the last thing I'll say is how Sam Raimi is from a horror background. He did the Evil Dead movies. I've seen the first one and the third one. I haven't seen the second one yet. But I do know that he did some of the horror Evil Deads. And the horror background that Sam Raimi has does kind of come into play in this movie. It's not a horror movie, but there's definitely some jump scares and some horror-ish moments. Like when Peter's transformation into Spider-Man, he kind of like lays down on the floor and grabs a blanket, and there's like flashes of skulls that pop out, which is kind of random. You get a really annoying jump scare. I've always hated this jump scare. It's a jump scare that happens when Peter's at the hospital visiting Aunt May. He falls asleep, and all of a sudden the goblin just pops up like, ah! I've always hated that jump scare, but it gets me every time. That jump scare freaked me out as a kid. But even the end of this movie is the most brutal Spider-Man fight of all the Spider-Man movies that I've seen. It's not necessarily the biggest fight or over the top where the Goblin and Spider-Man are fighting in that abandoned building, but it's just brutal. Goblin is just relentless on Spider-Man, punching him, kicking him all over the place. He flies through glass, and what I loved about this movie and the Sam Raimi trilogy in general is how much Spider-Man's suit gets completely torn up and ripped, because it just adds a realism to it. His suit is constantly getting trashed, and it gets ripped, it gets pulled apart. And in this final sequence where he's fighting the Green Goblin, he's bleeding, he looks in bad shape, the Goblin is kicking his butt, and it's just the most brutal fight of all the Spider-Man movies. It's so grounded in reality. It's just brutal. Spider-Man's bleeding, he's got a black eye. It's great. I love it. It's brutal stuff, and it definitely comes from like his horror background that Sam Raimi has. And it brings just such a recognizable style and distinct moments in this movie of Spider-Man. The first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie really stands out from all the rest. And I still love Spider-Man to this day. And anyway guys, that was the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. What do you guys think about Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie? Comment down below, let me know. I want to know all your thoughts and opinions about this movie. And let's get a fun conversation going. Guys, thanks again for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. I'll be back next week talking about Spider-Man 2. And hopefully I'll be back very soon talking about Aladdin when I finally get a chance to see it. Once again guys, my name's Zachary Milne. Thank you for talking movies with me. And hope you have yourself a great day.